Now, yeah. Good evening, everyone, and a warm welcome. Okay. Is this fine now? Are we good to start? Okay. So I'm absolutely thrilled to be here today with this session and to be a moderator. I'm Raj Lakshmi Nirma, and I work as the communications lead for the Policy Innovation Science Program. And I should actually admit, my luck is such that every time I get the last session for the event, usually the desert slot when everyone is tired and wants to get back home. But I promise you something, this session is going to be very interactive and engaging, and you will definitely not regret sticking around. Yeah. So we have lined up a set of fantastic speakers for the day, and speakers who come with a lot of field experience, with a lot of experience about implementing policies on ground and having gone through the challenges and addressed them. So it's going to be quite interesting. We live in an era defined by crises, constant change, and profound uncertainty, right? From climate shocks and geopolitical instability to health pandemics and economic disruptions, the global landscape is constantly shifting. So the need for evidence-based solution has not been greater ever, right? So this session will showcase what CGIAR and its partners are doing to respond to the difficult problems during crisis, times of change and uncertainty, and how they continue to be committed to equitable and sustainable development. So, all right, so now having set the stage, it's now my honor to welcome the Director General of Alliance Biodiversity CIAT, Marcela Quintro, whose impressive journey leading innovative and multidisciplinary research teams means her opening remarks will offer significant insights for us, all right? So over to you, Marcela.
Thank you, everyone, and welcome to this session. I wish to have more people in the room because I think we have witnessed in the last couple of months how powerful could be policy to shape the future of our food systems. So we usually talk, and I'm also actually helping the climate action program in the CGIAR, and we said, well, we need to work in a climate crisis because climate is also shaping the food, land, and water systems, but see again how policies how fast it can shape also the food, land, and water systems. So this is why in the CGIAR, we are also putting together a new chapter of our policy research agenda that is now going to be the CGIAR program on policy innovations. Very critical in this moment, and here I want to make two important points. In the CGIAR and with our partners, we work a lot on technological innovations to support the transformation of food, land, and water systems. But as we said this morning in the plenary, for those that were there, those are not going to be sufficient to help to shape our future food systems if we don't work on the institutional innovations, including those that are policy related. So this program of the CGIAR is about that. Is first, how with science we can inform better policy, and especially from an holistic perspective, right? It's not only policy on water or only on land use or only on climate. It's how we can inform policies in those countries that demand our support to do that. This week, I have been listening also many country reps saying, you guys have the information, the evidence, how you can help us with that evidence to put together the projects that we need to support the sustainable development of our countries. So that's one key responsibility that we have with the policy program of the CGIAR. And the second one, and I found it very interesting in the program today, and is that today we are going also to have a dialogue around what is our role when it is about science diplomacy, what it is about. Sometimes we said, oh, we also want to advocate, we also want to inform the policies, but really how we have to do it in a way that is mediated by science evidence and with the right diplomacy. So we don't talk much about this in the CG, but I think nowadays talking about science diplomacy is a must, and we need to put it on the table and discuss this. So I'm very glad that this is going to be on the table today. So with this, I just want to open the session to embark together on this discussion around this and see how we can also listen from all of you who came here on insights, right? We are finalizing, putting together this program. So for us, this is also a session to listen feedback on how we can play a better, even better role in informing the policies, and then policies that are going to help shape in a positive way our food, land, and water system. So imagine what we can do together, and imagine if we can do it with the right science, informing the right policies, and with the right diplomacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcela, for those insightful opening remarks. So building on that foundation, it's now my pleasure to introduce Jonathan Mockshell, Senior Agri-Food and Policy Economist at Alliance Bioversity Seattle. Jonathan brings a lot of clarity and insightful context to all complex issues we work on, thanks to his research acumen, I should say. So over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you very much, Raji, for the kind introduction. And we would like to start off. Let me see if you work in policy. Just show your hand. All right, majority works in policy. So looks like it's a bit of a self-selection bias. Next slide, please. So we all know that we are living in a time of crisis, and we've lived through the COVID crisis. We've lived through the Russia-Ukraine war. We've lived through conflict, and conflicts are not new. It keeps coming on from time to time. And if we combine the effect of all this, the multiplier is that there is rapid change, there is constant change. And this change is something that we are witnessing now. And the new one on the block, do you know that? The new change. I can hear tariffs. Yes, the trade war. The orange man, all right. Trade war. So combining trade war and the concerns that many governments are facing now, particularly in the global south. We have crisis with regards to the youth batch, where many wants to find a way to create jobs for their citizens, particularly the youth. Some want to increase food production, food productivity, and now the shift is towards healthy diets and also providing affordable meals for the citizens. Food and nutrition security is on the lips of many. And this is combined with a climate crisis as well, which we've been facing for several years. And if we combine all this, we see that the effect is something that is interconnected, and it makes it very complex. And that's why I liked Marcela's point on the systems approach and also science diplomacy, bringing different actors together to find solutions to the challenges that we are facing. At the heart of this is always a strategy, a policy, a process, a procedure to find solutions to all these problems. And I would say that policy is a force multiplier when it comes to reimagining our food system and changing our food systems towards one that is sustainable, healthy for the planet and the future. Next slide. So our food system, I would say, is not broken. We just need to try to find a way to fix it, because those challenges and how they intersect would always be around us. And policy in itself, someone says, when you see it, you know it. It's very complex. It can be multi-actor, multi-scale, very messy. And if we look at this here, that looks like some sort of sausage and spaghetti combined together. We see the complexity. Which side would you like to hold? I mean, you pull one out and the other is coming in, which also shows the trade-off that we are facing. In Africa, a lot of governments have been coming out with policies and processes to solve some of the challenges that I just mentioned. Some have made progress, others are making progress, but still there is more to do. We find the same in Asia, we find the same in LAC. So the issue is, why do we have a lot of policies, but then implementation sometimes can be weak. And what are the challenges that we are facing when it comes to policy? And we all need to be very open about this and discuss why so many policies, programs at the global level, at the regional level, at the national level, but implementation sometimes can be weak. And why also do we have all these challenges still with us today if policies are really working? That's a question that I would like to leave for the Q&A section. Next slide. Next slide. So we know that a lot of processes, which we call the policy cycle or policy processes, have been implemented. And I want to represent this with the kaleidoscope, which is developed by our colleague Daniel Rensnick from IFPRI, which basically shows how the policy process works, starting with agenda setting, where issues are brought to the table. And then the key issue is who is at the table. Is it inclusive? Do we have all the partners around? And then how that agenda is designed, prioritized to come out with key policy issues, the adoption stage, the implementation, evaluation, and then how reform takes place. But if we look at all the key issues within this kaleidoscope model of change, we see that there is a lot that is packed in there. So it doesn't even make the policy process very simple. But then it gives us a lot of indicators that we need to consider when it comes to how we can change the policy environment and the key indicators that we need to bring about a change or reform. In this room, I know some might be breeders, some might be in the policy field, some might be working in the environmental field and different fields. And for those who are working in breeding, maybe one question is, you've developed a lot of innovations and solutions and technology, sometimes a bundle of them. How come these innovations are not scaled? Or why are farmers not adopting it? And so there is a question about the enabling environment for the innovations. And yesterday in one of the sessions, we talked about this. The second question is the type of institutions and institutional mechanisms and incentives that we need to transition from current business as usual to a multifunctional landscape, which will be essential to ensuring that we have sustainability. The second is on nutrition. The third is on nutrition. And then Marcella also talked about the science diplomacy, how we engage, how we support the agricultural reforms with different actors. And then why some policies are effective, others are not, and what works where and how. And the question about smallholder agriculture, is this still something that we need to pursue in Africa, in Asia? The Green Revolution, how it helped us and what needs to change. Next slide. So all these questions are on the minds of all of us. And if we bring this together, we'll say that solutions are there, but there is also a lot of questions. And that's exactly what the Policy Innovation Program is going to do. And this comes from some of the CGIAR initiatives. And there are a number of challenges which we've mentioned already. But in terms of solution, what we want to do is co-development of research-based innovations and recommendations. And here the key is with our partners on the ground. And we want to do this through agenda setting, through rapid response, capacity, and tools. So basically having the tools, capacity with the partners, developing evidence base, using this evidence base to set agenda, and then following up through the policy cycle and the policy. And this is very important because if we have a lot of changes happening now, we need to respond very fast, swiftly, and provide insights that policymakers need to make a decision now and not wait for too long. And at the end, we want to be able to use our processes within the Policy Innovation Program to achieve a number of outcomes. Next slide. So at the end of the day, we would say that for the tools that we need within the CGIAR programs and also through the Policy Innovation Program, we've developed a tool that we call the Policy Sourcebook or the Paper Sourcebook, which provides a number of frameworks, tools, and case studies when it comes to developing and designing policy processes. And this complex diagram here starts with a number of different domains, the frameworks we need and the tools. And at the end of the day, we'll say that if we are able to apply these tools very well, will be able to provide solutions and insights that's helpful and rapid for policymakers. When it comes to evidence, we've developed a number of evidence already. And if we look at the last 50 years and the different years, we've come out with a number of solutions and insights. The Green Revolution was one of them, the role of smallholders, innovation diffusion, technology, the policy ecosystem, right through participatory and evidence-based, the CADEP policy processes, agricultural extension delivery models, innovation ecosystem. And then as we move on, we see a lot of questions coming. I was hoping that we should be having less questions as we move. But that tells us that we still have a lot of work to do here. The governance challenges, accountability mechanisms when it comes to implementing programs, rapid response, some of the challenges we are facing, and also digital tools, incentives, the youth when it comes to different countries, and then also the gender and enabling environment. So my hope is that the next 10 years we'll have less questions, not more questions. Next slide. And as part of the evidence that we've generated and how this evidence has been able to influence policy, there is a case study that we did, and we looked at the CADEP policy processes combined with national level policy making. And we noticed that there is a divergent belief, understanding, and policy processes when it comes to national level policy making and also regional policy making. And we noticed that most of the views of national government is quite different when it comes to that of the donor-led or donor-driven approach. And in terms of how they frame the problem, how they view things as subsidy, how they view technology, how they have positive image of themselves and negative image of others. And our conclusion is that there are a number of things that are very important for policymakers, which we've listed here within the countries. And the key lesson is that we need to bring both what I call the donor-led or donor-driven processes, policy processes, with the national-led policy processes. And sometimes the national-led policy processes, you find that through campaign promises or even the party manifestos. Next slide. So the key thing that we did with this evidence was first to see which coalitions or actors we can bring together through what we call the advocacy coalition framework. So we looked at the interest of the actors, the resources that they have, social capital, political capital, their beliefs and ideas, and how that can be filtered through agenda setting, so things that we need to prioritize, the policy formulation process, implementation, and then impact. So by using our evidence to influence all the different actors or coalitions or networks, we were able to have a favorable policy making process in Ghana where the government was able to accept some of the insights that we shared, and particularly they are concerned with key issues that they find very important for the country, which we labeled as a very pro-interventionist or state-led approach. So with all this, particularly the last evidence that I presented, we noticed that the policy process and evidence generation takes quite some time. And sometimes by the time you respond, the issue is already off the table. So moving into the future, we are developing a new tool, which is still under the policy innovation program. We call the PEPA micro simulation tool. And this is AI powered, the first of its kind, a smart tool that helps policymakers to make decisions based on a rapid response of any issue that is relevant for the actors. We start by looking at the problems that's relevant for the country. Based on that, we allow AI to give us solutions, and based on that solutions, we present that through different insights and different tools. We'll be using this as part of our capacity strengthening and also dialogue with national actors, and particularly to give them this tool, and they can use it to generate their own policies and insights that would influence policy making and policy processes. So at the end of the day, within the policy program, we want to continue to build these tools, and research needs continuity. Evidence generation also needs continuity, and to work with actors, trust is very key. The partnership takes long. So we want to continue through the policy innovation program, and be able to generate a lot of insights that are relevant for the countries that we work with. So coming back to the question, why do we have a lot of policies, but at the end of the day, we still have challenges? And some of the questions that I raised are still very relevant for all of us today. I want to end you with these two quotes. And starting with the last one, I think the fundamental issue is that we need to understand why our society adopts its policies. And if we don't do that, we'll be poorly equipped to give useful advice on how to bring change or reforms. And the second one, which relates to that, is that policy is just a statement. And this statement of intent can tell us what we need to do. But we need to move from just policy making and policy processes to seeing real impact on the ground. And at the end of the day, we want to do all this together with you. And I hope that this teaser will be able to help us to think about how to work together moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Janardhan, for setting the stage for our discussion. So we now move on into a segment that will draw valuable insights from our past experience to inform our future. So I'm now pleased to invite our first speaker for this segment, Suchi, who's a policy engagement specialist at IVNI. She brings with her a wealth of experience in policy research and engagement. So I call her upon here to share her perspective on lessons from the past and insights for the future. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Raji. Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'll pick up from where Jonathan was mentioning that we do talk a lot about policy, but then, you know, we do have good policies at times, but policy implementation fails. So how do we make policy implementation work? And what I would be talking about, is how we had two case studies, two cases where we have worked on policy implementation to understand better the policy process, the policy formulation process, the implementation process, but also how to make that more effective. So one would be about Atal Bhujal Yojana, which is a national flagship policy of Government of India on groundwater governance, where we have worked with the government to understand the policy formulation, implementation, the gaps, and how to address those gaps. The second one would be the Tata Water Policy Program. Probably quite a few of you know, but for those who do not know, this is probably one of the longest standing partnership that CGIAR has with a donor organization. So Tata Trust is probably the oldest philanthropic organization in India, and this Tata partnership has been running for 25 years this year, and it has a long legacy of influencing important policies of the country, and I'll be talking about that next, please. So I'll first start with Atal Bhujal Yojana. So this is about ground. Okay, is this better? Great. I'll be first talking about Atal Bhujal Yojana. This is, like I said, a flagship policy of Government of India on groundwater governance. Importance of groundwater governance, if I talk about that, will be preaching to the choir, so I won't go into that. But what this policy does is it focuses on groundwater governance, emphasizing on institutional strengthening, capacity building, and also incentivizing good behavior, incentivizing convergence, incentivizing impact on groundwater conservation. So what did we do there? We used the political and institutional landscape analysis framework to understand how the policy was framed, why the policy came into existence, what are the implementation challenges, and how those can be addressed. But more importantly, we did not start this work with a research question. We thought of starting this work with a policy question that Atal Bhujal Yojana is a very ambitious policy on paper. So if it is working on the ground, then how do we make sure that those impact lies kind of continues beyond the policy implementation period? Next. So what we understood from the study is, well, there was a lot of understanding. And I think one of the most important understanding that we took home was how to integrate the perceptions, the lived experiences of different stakeholders, especially for a policy that's working on the grassroots, with the grassroots, how to take those understandings, those lived experiences, and integrate them into the policy process, into the implementation process. Definitely, there were a lot of understandings, a lot of findings from this, but what we tried to focus on to move ahead was the rethinking of training and training module. We focused on that because one of the major component of this policy is strengthening capacity of the grassroots, of women, of men, of the youth to conserve groundwater. And so we wanted to work on that and develop further on that with the government. Next, please. So to work on that, what we did was we undertook a lot of multi-stakeholder consultations, but also multi-stakeholder consultations, but also a lot of discussions with CSOs, with civil society organizations who had a long history of working in community mobilization for participatory groundwater governance and groundwater management. Go back, please. Yeah. So after that, we co-developed a training module, and we piloted that training module in in 2 states and 8 districts of India. And based on those learnings, we further refined it, shared it with the government, and from what I understand, from next month onwards, it will be scaled out to all the 8 states where Atal Bhujal Yojana is currently being implemented. So that is definitely a great achievement, and that work was done under the National Policy CGIAR Initiative on National Policies and Strategies. So that was great. But personally, for me, what was one of the most important takeaway from this is also one of the important achievement, I say, for this is that into the governance or the government's training structure and training modules, we could introduce serious games. We could introduce participatory learning techniques, which were not there before. We could introduce ways where they can prioritize, and they have to prioritize women and youth into this, into the policy spaces, develop their capacities to engage with the policy spaces, take responsibility, demand accountability for their water resources. So personally, for me, that was one of the major achievements of Atal Bhujal Yojana and the work that we have done. Okay, so next is the Imitator Water Policy Program. Again, like I said, it has been a long-standing partnership of 25 years, and it has influenced significant policies in the country. But before that, what was the major, the things that work for it is both Tata Trust and EMI has focused on the key strengths of both the institutions, both the organizations. Tata Trust has its huge network of associate organizations of CSOs. EMI has its scientific expertise, the research expertise that is provided. And with that, they have influenced a lot of policies, a lot of programs across. Definitely, I'm not going to go through all of that. Don't be scared. But the idea of putting it up is to say that in the past 25 years, a lot has been achieved. The ideas that were seeded by ITP has turned into policies and programs at state and national level. It has initiated investment worth trillions of dollars in the country. But also, the ideas seeded through ITP has developed organizations, which has led to institutions which are donor organizations themselves now. So the point of saying this is what the ITP has done, and this long-standing partnership and trust with a donor organization has done, is it has developed its own ecosystem. It has developed an ecosystem for policy engagement, for better policy dialogue, for bringing together multiple stakeholders into those discussions and making better programs all throughout the country. And these are the geographies that we have worked in. These are the geographies, and these are the strategies that we have taken to work with Tata Trust. So ITP basically works as a water and food advisor to Tata Trust now, and we work across the country. So I'll take just 30 seconds more. And the point that I want to make is that this kind of long-standing, we are talking about turbulent times, we are talking about policy changes, we are seeing the funding crunch everywhere. But then this kind of funding, what it does, it helps us do very important research. And this kind of partnerships is important to learn for CGIAR as well, but I think it's important. I don't think we have anyone from partner organizations here, donors, etc. But anyway, I will still say that it's important for the donors, the partner organizations, the funding organizations also to fund the work that we do, because the kind of impact that we have on ground, it's really, really important. And also what is more important is that this is not just funding research. This is seeding impact beyond government transitions, beyond budget cycles and all of that. So this kind of funding, it's not really kind of goodwill, but this is kind of seeding change for the future. So I'll stop there. And these are our works. So the pillar framework that I talked about, the publications, all we have done on Atal Bhujal Yojana, the ITP work that we have done, you can all find it here. Please scan the codes. If you want to ask me anything, I'll be open. But for now, over to Razi.
Thank you, Suchi, for those reflections from your work in India. So now we turn our attention to another critical region. Our next speaker specializes in policy research within the often intricate policy environment of Egypt. Please welcome Pharaoh's national researcher, Ivni, to share her thoughts. Over to you.
Thank you. So, hello, good afternoon, everyone. So over the last 2 days, we've been saying, are we asking the right questions? And yesterday, Ismahan told us that, are we asking the right policy questions before asking the right scientific questions? So in our work, imagine we have two policies, policy on agriculture that aims to expand agricultural areas to around 5 million hectares, but another policy on water resources that says that we don't have enough water to sustain this expansion in this time. So, but both policies are critical and both policies are urgent because food security, they address food security and water security. But the thing is that when there is this kind of fragmentation, investments and policy on the ground tend to be fragmented as well. So this is why in our policy research under our dearest CGIAR initiative, National Policies and Strategies, we have worked on policy coherence to address policy needs and global risks. Still, the first slide is. So what do we mean by global risks? In the World Economic Forum last report, they reported that the first top risk that people report on is extreme weather events. And in the next 10 years, it would be natural resources shortage. So how can our food, land, and water policies respond to and address the needs of natural resources users in the light of extreme weather events and also shortage of natural resources? In IMI, I work as a political science researcher. It's a tough job, right? I get to manage governments meeting, negotiate with them, trying to find an integrated thinking and system across different ministries and across different policy actions. So our work in policy coherence lies at the core of, it's not only a technical exercise, but it's also a political exercise. So we ask, how do policies evolve over time across different political regimes and systems? What are the policy entry points for change? Who is making the formal decisions and who is left out, and how different policies speak to each other? So to evaluate policy coherence, we used our PILA framework, which Suchi has highlighted. It's the Policy and Institutional Analysis Landscape. This PILA framework helps us understand and assess the policy flux across institutional complexity and helps us understand what are the policy dynamics. It's around four pillars. The first one is understanding the contextual factors. Second thing, action arenas of food, land, and water. The third thing is patterns of interaction. And the fourth thing is what are the changes and where are the flux in policy landscape. So, So in our research, we focused on 3 national strategies under 3 different ministries. The first one is the Ministry of Agriculture and Land Reclamation. The second one is the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation. And the third one is the Ministry of Environment. We relied on a content analysis of these national strategies to identify where are the common ground across these sectoral policies. How do they speak to each other? And our answer was that climate adaptive water productivity. And this was our main policy entry into our policy coherence analysis. So first key opportunity to ask the right policy questions is that researchers need to ground their work in national strategies and legal framework, understand how sectoral strategies speak to each other, and build our narrative from that common ground. Only that we can bring research closer to integrated policy action. The second component, we can change the slide. Yeah. Okay, so the second component is around the 2 components of policy coherence, which are on policies and institutions. The first one is on policies. So we are trying to evaluate the synergies and trade-offs toward maximizing the outcomes of climate adaptive water productivity and minimizing unintended consequences. Here we didn't only focus on assessing coherence in biophysical water productivity, but also economic and social water productivity in this integrated system. So the second point, key entry on asking the right questions, is that to assess and map all policy goals and instruments that helps us respond to our policy common goal, which is climate adaptive water productivity, and what are the synergies and what are the trade-offs. And this would help us design more cohesive interventions. For institutions, we see that it's around power dynamics, institutional complexity around food, land, and water. We navigate different ministries, different research centers, different donors, different financial institutions, navigating vertical relationships between the national level with the local level and civil society organizations. All this complexity, the institutional coherence, we are trying to address it through the 2 mechanisms, the power and interest matrix and the social network analysis. So through these tools, we assessed the power of each actor to dominate decisions and to move decisions around climate adaptive water productivity, and also to identify their position and relationships with other actors. So this third point is around power dynamics, social network of institutional arrangements. It helps us set the tone for who is making the decision, who is left out from the table on making the decision, and thus it helps us understand what are the other spaces that we need to create for others to be involved in decision making. Yeah, and of course, we've been actively chairing this research with the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation through joint meetings and seminars. Our key takeaways, we have a lot. So next slide, please. So I don't have the time to tell them all, so you can scan the flagship report and please read it. We'll be happy to receive your comments as well. So 2 main takeaways. The first takeaway is that on the institutional network analysis, we found that there is a weak influence of civil society organization on the development of policies. So we've taken this step forward, and we've partnered with a think tank at the American University in Cairo, and we developed some strategies to overcome toward water justice in agricultural water management. So this is a work that is 90% completed, so it will be published very soon. The second thing is that when we worked on climate adaptive water productivity, we focused on the economic and social productivity. We find that it's less focused on, and there are many trade-offs in those. So we are trying to scale the impact of what are the interlinkages between adopting modern water-saving technologies and access to markets, better affordability of food, and increase of income, and job creation. So to conclude, 1 minute. So this we will scale. We will also plan to scale this this economic and social water productivity by working. We are tapping the opportunities to work with National Research Center of Water on water reallocation policies and how they influence the distribution and the consumption of water. Yeah. So yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Maureen. I'm sorry. Thank you, Feroz. I saw the slide and I was already ready for Maureen. So our final speaker in this segment is also a researcher who's deeply engaged in the Egyptian landscape. So please welcome Noreen for her remarks and her case study. Yeah, over to you, Noreen.
Thanks so much. Yes, so I'll continue talking about similar things, but rather than presenting beautiful frameworks that we've just seen, I'm largely going to tell you stories. I hope you enjoy them. So as Jonathan mentioned, these sorts of relationships that we have with different kinds of partners can change. They can become tumultuous, and we have to move with the times and who we're with, right? So I'm going to talk about Egypt as well. And this is a place where IFPRI has a country office, and we have deep relationships that have been established over years with several different bodies in the government. But the one that I'll speak to today is the Ministry of Social Solidarity. And they basically run Egypt's suite of social protection programs. Now, this relationship started in 2017, largely thanks to Clemens, who was the head of the office there. And it's continued under Sikandar Kurdi, who's now the head of office. And through this relationship, we've gone through three. I forgot to tell you about this slide. Thank you. We've gone through three different ministers, okay? But each time they might change, their priorities might change, but they still want to work with us because they've developed a trusted relationship with us. They know we will tell it like it is and do the research rigorously, but we will do so with what they're thinking in mind, right? So we've worked with the Ministry of Social Solidarity on a number of projects, but I'll just discuss two that I've been more involved with. One is the Tekefel and Karama program, which is their national cash transfer program. And the second one is called Forza, which is a livelihoods program that is meant to help people who were receiving cash transfers under Tekefel to graduate and improve their livelihoods, more sort of pull yourself up by your bootstraps sort of thing. I don't know who wears bootstraps anymore, but they still say it. So how did we make this relationship as smooth as possible? A couple of things. Flexibility is essential. We're not coming in there saying, we think this, you should do this. No, we should be coming in with respect and flexibility, understanding the partner's needs. And as Jonathan and others have talked about, it's not one thing. There are many different people. We have to know who's at the table, what's going on, where are different people coming from. So, this kind of flexibility in thinking is important. And that extends especially to research, right? So different methods of research. Oh, hey. I thought my presentation would be interesting, but not to wildlife. But Karibu Kenya. Right. Monkey-like flexibility, even. So is it back? Oh, it is. It is back. Yes, let's be inclusive. I'm not scared. You're scared. Okay. What was I saying? Right. Flexibility. Okay, so in terms of, you know, this kind of staying the course and long-term partnership with any implementer actually with research, you also have to be flexible in your approach to the research and the way that it's conducted. So for us, myself and my team, we're economists, we're micro economists, and we usually run randomized trials, right? You have a control group, you have a treatment group that receives a program, and you do some fancy coding to tell you what the impact of the program was. Now, not everyone likes doing that, right? The government of Egypt in the first program, TICAFL, they were not happy to randomize. This is a politically sensitive issue. You are giving people money, and there has to be a very clear reason for why some people might get a program and some people might not. So what we were able to do is actually work on the design with them. They have an eligibility cutoff, right? So what we could do was really rigorous evidence, not based on a randomized trial. Not everything can and should be randomized, but we used a regression discontinuity design instead. And so this allowed still for a causal interpretation of what we found, but it was done in a way that made sense also to the government in terms of the approach. Another thing is to be there, right? Be on the ground. To do this study, we needed to use their administrative database of 11 million Egyptian households to do the sampling so that we could then do the study. That is sensitive information, right? So what we did is we actually had a researcher go to the ministry, sit there with the technical officer, work on their system, and that's we only extracted the data that we needed to do the sampling. We didn't take private information, sensitive information. So having those kinds of sensitivities in mind is also important. Third is pretty obvious, I would say co-design, right? At every step of the way. So what we did is we designed the research questions together. We designed the questionnaires together. And we shared data updates frequently, right? You don't just come in, say, okay, great, we talked to you about this study, let's run off and do it. No, you do it together, really. And finally, you know, again, coming back to what Jonathan said, keep in mind the politics and the economic situation at that time. Depending on what's going on, they will have specific questions and goals. And the example again of TICAFL, this is a huge program. And the minister, for her sake and for the sake of the people benefiting for the program, really needed to show something from this to continue the program, continue to get finances to fund the program, right? So we did 2 rounds of data collection. In the first round, soon after the program began, we found these unbelievably impressive decreases in poverty. Okay, this meant people were more food secure, people were spending more and able to meet their basic needs. This was fabulous. Everyone loved it. It was all over the news. Clemens shook the minister's hand several times, I'm sure. You know, and this generated a lot of interest and funding to continue the program, which was great. That's what you want. A program works well, it keeps going, right? The second round that we did was several years after the program had begun, and we found no such effect. This caused a bit of a stir, but as researchers, you know, we found a different interpretation to the results that we thought was actually better. So rather than increasing consumption, which is actually the measure that was sort of blown up in the media from the first round of results that we found, you know, we said, okay, actually what we're finding is that people are paying down their debts and they're increasing their assets. What does that mean? They're stable. They've moved beyond just taking care of their basic needs. They're you know what? I forgot to tell you to change the slide again. It's the monkey's fault, though. It's 100% the monkey's fault. And he took a minute of my time, so I get one more minute. Right. So the idea here is, explain sensitive results privately first. Don't just go out there with your blog or your paper. No one's going to read it anyway. Sit and talk with people. What is their interpretation? What do they see from this? How can this provide rigorous evidence to inform policy? But also, how does it need to be packaged? How do the findings need to be interpreted possibly differently from the metric that people are used to, right? And finally, we heard yesterday from, I think it was someone who works in the Kenyan office of, it was in the policy seminar, the president's office. Yeah, Nancy, thank you. So I really took to heart what she said yesterday. She said, when you come to us and give us your fancy looking policy brief for your blog, we need 3 things. They're great, but we need 3 things. We need 3 options, not 7. We need them costed, and we need to understand the trade-offs. And we don't need your fancy blog with your fancy pictures. What we need is an Excel matrix. Just show us these are the options. This is the cost. These are the positives. These are the negatives. You know what I mean? So really understand what they want. And not everyone will want that. I like to think that lots of people read my blogs, but apparently not everyone does. So really to understand how they want to understand things. It's not for us to, to say all the time. I think maybe I'll leave it there, but just to say that, they want to do another round with us, right? So this partnership has been successful, and it's going to keep going regardless of what, what came out in the last round. We will continue to work with them on what they're interested in learning, right? And so we need to be prepared to pivot. And we will be pivoting with studying a new version of the program, which is going to be really exciting. And maybe at a future Science Week, I'll get to tell you about it. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you, Noreen. I'll make sure I read your next blog. So thank you. Thank you, Feroz. Thank you, Suchi, for those truly illuminating case studies, I should say. So it's inspiring to see the work FPRI and CGIAR is doing and has done and the impact of it. So now drawing upon these real-world examples of policy engagement and research in action, we transition into a more critical discussion now of how research evidence informs policymaking. Next slide, please. Yeah. So here, we are fortunate to have a panel which is comprised of individuals with rich and impactful experience in this very area. So I would like to welcome Purnima Menon, Senior Director, Food and Nutrition Policy at FPRI. Maybe you can sit there because there's a mic as well there, yeah. And Inga Jacobs-Mata, Strategic Program Director, Water Growth and Inclusion at IVMI. And then connecting with us online from Kipra, Evans Geno, is he already online? Do we know? Okay, he's a principal policy analyst at Kipra. And
yes, thank you so much. I'm online.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. So, and representing the European Commission, we have the Director General of International Partnerships. Do we have him already? Oh, thank you. Senior Policy Officer? Senior Policy Officer, is that correct? Okay, sorry for that. So to kick off our conversation, so you're good to be seated wherever you are, or you want to sit together, or maybe, okay. Okay, all right, okay. Okay, so to kick off our conversation, so my first question I would like to have with Purnima So drawing on your extensive experience in food and nutrition policy, I'm curious about your reflections on how research organizations like CG and their partners should be thinking about adapting to the ever-evolving needs of policy landscapes. So what are some key considerations that come to your mind on this?
Thanks, Suchi. Thanks, Raji. I was thinking about Suchi's talk on water and the long time frame of that. So, as I mentioned in the plenary this morning, I've had the great privilege of being a researcher in a very dynamic policy context, mainly in India, but also in South Asia for the last 17 years now, so since 2007. And in our early work, we responded to, really a response from the then Prime Minister of India saying, hey, this economic growth trajectory and stunting malnutrition trajectory isn't jiving for us. This is problematic. We need IFPRI to come in and help us understand this. And, I think as researchers, we're so tuned to the idea of selling solutions. And I think one of my first and sort of most sobering moments as I embarked on this effort to help people across the policy ecosystem in India understand all the amazing evidence that was available on solutions was this total realization that people didn't see the problem the same way. And they didn't understand necessarily, not everyone understood what stunting was, not everyone understood what malnutrition was, not everyone understood why children were stunted, why we might promote cash transfers together with behavior change or a collection of multi-sectoral strategies to address something that is really a complex problem. And I think for me, what that made really so clear was that in as much as researchers innovate to identify solutions, knowing that the people who need to pick up some of these solutions and engage with it need to actually walk along to continue to agree that a problem is really a problem and that the solutions that we have to offer actually help to solve that problem in the ways that they think about it. And that's something that has come up over and over and over again, and I think I feel that, we've had sort of a bit of a successful run because we have, 4 administrations in the government of India, and nutrition has only always stayed on the policy agenda as a problem of interest to the policy ecosystem, and has increased in salience, despite lots of sort of hemming and hawing about whether the way we measure malnutrition is real, whether Indian children are, shot because of genetic potential, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And in a sense, it speaks to the idea that, somehow we've managed to engage and keep people around recognizing that that problem is an important problem to solve. And I think we don't necessarily do enough work on that. What we're experiencing right now globally is that 2 problems that I think we in the CGIAR and across many other countries think are really important problems for the world: climate change and social inequality, most notably gender inequality. Those problems are being wiped in one very influential policy and financing space. Those of us who care about that problem today need to do as much work to think about what are we going to do to keep that problem alive in the minds of everybody in this world who should be acting towards it as we invest in identifying solutions, right? So that's one point. And to me, this is where science diplomacy comes in. This is where building policy communities that go well beyond, the life and tenure of policy makers in a political system stay. So for as long as you can keep a policy community together, and that to me, a policy community includes knowledge producers, researchers, it includes civil society, it includes media, it includes, friendly and science-minded sort of administrators and politicians who've decided that, that's a problem that's kind of hanging with me for the rest of my life, because then you find champions to, both keep the problem alive and to keep sort of the energy alive around finding solutions to that problem and financing it. So, I encourage all of us to think not just about keeping issues and the solutions to those issues alive in the context of, individual policymakers or administrations, but to really think about building entire policy communities that make problems undeniable, regardless of what individuals in power here and there might say, that keep the financing flowing to solve those problems, that keep the innovation going to keep identifying problems to it. I also want, I want to close sort of my comments with something for researchers in the room. If you haven't already, I highly recommend reading a phenomenal paper by Paul Kearney and Catherine Oliver, who've done a whole review on evidence to policy and have distilled that in Nature. So their review is published in a high impact journal on the do's and don'ts for people who are thinking about evidence to policy. And they offer sort of 8 tips. But the most important tip for me, for those of us who are from the research ecosystem, is do good quality research. There is no substitute for doing good quality research, because that's what makes problems undeniable. That's what makes the solutions undeniably, if you can defend the research, if it's published in your top journals, if it's, nobody denies the quality of that work, then our credibility is really strong, right? And I think we need to have as many conversations about that. Because what you want is high quality research delivering high impact. What you don't want is low quality research driving impact, because that's actually dangerous. If we give policymakers the wrong advice based on science that is not going to pass the basic benchmarks for science, we're actually behaving in ways that are really dangerous. And so the ethics, I think it is the most ethical thing that researchers can do in this ecosystem is to do phenomenally good research and to build community with the people who want to see impact on the problems that we have, right? So I think for me, reflecting on the many years of work and engaging in this world, those are just some opening thoughts. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Purnima. So Inga, I have a follow-up question to what Purnima just mentioned. So the global policy environment seems to be changing quite dramatically, right? So from your perspective, how do we, as a research community, evolve our approaches and respond more effectively? Yeah.
Thanks very much, and hi everyone. Really great to be here and to hear the wonderful presentations of the researchers and the NPS. So my name is Inga Jacobs-Mata. I have always been a political scientist. That's my sort of, my background, and working in the water sector, right, for however many years. But over the past 5 years or so, I sort of changed direction, if you will, and I went from the very traditional work around policy making and environmental governance to looking at how we strengthen enabling environments for agribusinesses, particularly, so for private sector, right, to scale innovations. And the reason why, I did that is because I thought, what's the fastest route to impact? We in our region here in East and Southern Africa, agribusinesses are like the glue that link the farm to the market. And so if we can target more effort, even policy, governance support, helping these businesses navigate regulatory barriers, from taxation to incentives, other types of regulatory barriers as well, that we can reach, a faster policy impact. So I agree with Purnima around good quality research, but I would say, how can we do it faster? Because I feel, and maybe let's have the debate, but I feel slow policy, especially in a climate crisis or any crisis, is bad policy. And I feel our policy processes are sometimes too slow. So if you think about the innovation process, the speed at which innovation is happening now, right? AI, carbon credits, regulation is not keeping up, right, with these kinds of innovations. So how do we become a better technical support partner, strategic knowledge partner, to accelerate policy making, policy processes for those partners? So I want to just pose that question. And I think we do see some really good examples already in the portfolio. I think the Feroz, Suchi, your presentations, also Noreen, the focus around, trust building and that kind of, really embedding ourselves in these processes is a good one, because the only way we reach that speed, that acceleration of policy making, is that long process of partnership building, right? So we have to invest in that. But once we get in the door, how do we get our partners to work a lot faster in these spaces? So that was my point. The other one is perhaps yeah, I think also linked to Purnima's point about building policy communities. I think definitely support that, because we see now, the need, and also coming now from the scaling program perspective, we see the need to work beyond our traditional, decision makers, government decision makers. Decision making now is so pluralized. It's so many different actors are involved in decision making at the moment. And so how do we keep up and engage with those partners in these processes? Let me leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that important perspective. So, Ivan's connecting with us from Kipra. So you're right in the front lines of policy analysis, I should say. So what are your thoughts on how we can better equip the policymakers and also the civil society with the tools needed to generate and utilize evidence? Over to you, Iman.
Thank you so much, and colleagues. And I want to apologize for having been working virtually instead of being there physically. But I am Ngeno Evans. I'm a principal policy analyst at Kipra in Kenya. And I'm in charge of a department where we focus on policy research to inform Kenya's economic transformation, particularly in agriculture, environment, and water resource management. The main aim of this session was actually to provide evidence, particularly to action, where we have to actually put forward the value of research in policy making. And I want to thank the presenters because they have given us some evidences from various regions in the world. And that is a more critical area because research is critical to shaping policies that drive sustainable development, especially in times of crisis and transitions. An example of that is recent few years we had the COVID-19 pandemic, which actually disrupted global food systems, highlighting particularly the need for data-driven responses. That crisis alone was actually cited by FAO to have actually caused several households, about 35% of households in sub-Saharan Africa, to face critical or severe food insecurity due to several market failures, including supply chain disruption. So back to your question, when we talk about how can we evolve and respond effectively to a shift in global policy environment, I have given one example, and the most important answer I can give there is maybe the first one is that we need to have a clear guidance on how to follow the trends, particularly on the global policy landscape. One of them is the issue to do with climate change. We also have issues to do with food security and other sustainable development goals that are shaping the policy discourse worldwide. And there's also a need for governments to focus more on public-private partnership and sustainable finance, as well as green jobs. An example that I can give there is that we have worked with a CGIAR, CGIAR Research Initiative, and we have actually developed an MPG tool and a CST tool, which is a dashboard kind of, and it will help the country to actually have a clear focus as far as the climate change indicators are concerned. But the best practice, for example, that can be adapted is to develop a policy rapid response mechanism. Example in Africa is the one that the African Union Condendo early warning system provides real-time conflict and crisis monitoring, which is a very good guidance, particularly for policy making across the continent. There is also a need to build a data-driven policy advocacy. And this calls for government again to integrate the data-driven policy decisions, particularly on various global issues. But in the Kenyan context, we are really focusing on how to increase agricultural productivity, because food security is our key concern. So now, coming to the response, as far as CGIAR centers are concerned, there's a very big opportunity of leveraging with big data, as well as predictive analytics. For example, using satellite imaging to track for example, desert locust movement across the world. CGIAR can help. And some studies have indicated that it can assist in actually reducing up to a tune of about 8.5 billion losses. And for this, I want to give an example. There's a work that we are doing with the Joint Research Commission for the European nations. And we are focusing so much on tracking the land degradation, particularly in Kenya, as well as restoration. And we are mapping out and tracking the progress and linking them with various key economic indicators, including food security, as well as carbon issues to do with maybe carbon credit. Lastly, there is also need to strengthen policy capacity, particularly among the partnering countries. I want to give an example. There was a presenter from IFPRI, and the IFPRI has actually have a policy innovative kind of a lab in Bangladesh, for example, which has actually created a lot of positive policy directions as far as nutrition sensitive agricultural production is concerned. And that has actually led to the reduction in malnutrition among particularly under 5 children. And I think with that is what I can say from my end. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lance. So that's a critical point about equipping various stakeholders, right? So when we are talking about the role of stakeholders and how to influence, what they do. So I would like to have a question with you, Guy, because from the international lens, from the European Commission point of view, so how can research organizations like CG most effectively support their partner countries? What do you think? A couple of thoughts from your side.
Thank you. Maybe to react on the presentation and to answer your question first, I can see in your first slide of Jonathan, you mentioned rapid response, emergency response. For sure, we will have a lot of demand for emergency answers in relationship with what you mentioned as a trade war. But I think we still need to keep in mind that we need to have a holistic approach and to provide, to really have a multidimensional analysis, including the economic, environmental, and social dimensions. Because very often in the short term, we just ask for some economic elements to make decisions, and we don't take into account other dimensions, and still they are very important. So how we can really rapidly answer some questions, but avoiding too short answers and to reduced answers. And to some extent, if I remember the fertilizers crisis in 22, we had to build some political position, to discuss with other donors, governments, and so on. And for sure, we ask some economists to provide some data regarding consumption, incomes, efficiency of fertilizers, but we also needed to mobilize other type of expertise from the agronomists, from the traders and so on. So the question is how we can mobilize the scientific expertise, not just the economists, or the specialists of policies to contribute to policy. And for us, the answer was really a global answer, including the technical dimension with quite in-depth reflection to have a narrative, including why to which extent we support chemical fertilizers, and we want to support more holistic approach. So we need to mobilize different type of expertise. The second point is we talk about interface between science and policy. And you mentioned the long-term partnership you need to build. You mentioned the necessity to include different actors, ministries, civil societies, and so on. It takes time, and we need to provide very rapid answers. So the question is how we can build science policy interface, for example, at country level with the UN pathway. Maybe there is an opportunity to have some space for discussing policy by mobilizing science. And maybe we need more research on this topic, how to build science policy interface beyond, let's say, personal capacities and between some ministries and some research team to build something stronger. As far as remember, there was in 2024 in Montpellier, the Montpellier process to think about this science policy interface. Even in Europe, there are some discussion how we can build science policy interface to build stronger policies and to avoid too short and too rapid answers. And so it's maybe a research question. And the third point was also addressed by some people, including speakers, panelists. We need to strengthen the capacities of researchers to do policy innovation interventions. We talk about strengthening capacity of people in partner organizations, so it's quite important. But I think we also need to strengthen the capacity of other researchers not working on policy, and how we can make sure that some researchers are also able to contribute to policy. As far as I remember, we have a Desiree initiative. It's around 70 different projects, and around 50% of the projects have policy components with researchers not specialized in policy dimension. So how we can strengthen these capacities to make these people able to contribute. But we also need to capacitate, you mentioned that, to capacitate the policymakers, because I think you don't still have smart policymakers, and you need to work with them to make them understand the problem first, and maybe to understand the different solutions. So it takes time too, but I think we need to include this dimension of how to capacitate policymakers to better understand the question and to better develop policy questions and to better understand what could be the different options. And in this case, I think it's quite important to have this dimension, even in our own administration.
Thank you. Thank you. So now, building on all these points, I would like to actually circle back to the fundamental question, of impact. So how do we collectively strengthen the linkages between research and policy to bring about real world change? So it's open to any of the panelists who would like to pick up this question, and then maybe we'll open the floor for questions from the audience, if that's okay. Purnima, maybe you can answer this from the nutrition perspective. Yeah.
Change is slow. I know we're all impatient, but change is slow. And I don't think it's because policymakers don't care. Really, I think I've had some varied, but I would say over the last several years, really incredible experiences of working with very smart policymakers in the South Asian region. And what I find is their jobs are very complex. They're trying to make decisions under difficult circumstances. They're working with, often set fiscal space in the environments they're working in and trying to make smart decisions within available budgets. And many times there is political backlash for some of the decisions that they would end up making. And so, but when we work together with them and you're working towards a sort of stated impact, sometimes it can take years to get to that point where, things move. And then when they move so fast that you begin to see the impact. So we've certainly had that kind of set of experiences as well. So I really think about it, again, from the perspective of communities that deliver change. How do you get things to tipping point, really, and think about not just the policy decision, but actually the systems that need to deliver, the innovations and other things that actually deliver impact. They need to get to tipping point too. A very interesting anecdote, if you don't mind. So, in the context of our work that we did in India, the official political launch of something called the National Nutrition Mission was only in September 2018. But for the 10 years preceding that, there had been work done across different policy communities, people supporting state governments, people supporting implementation systems, people supporting and working with civil society, et cetera, just to kind of build the systems for delivery, to innovate around thinking about, can we actually deliver this? If they say yes, they're going to do it, working within the system that existed. And what happened with the announcement of, by the Prime Minister of the National Nutrition Mission is that the political announcement really just accelerated the implementation actions that many people had been working on for many years before that. And in our research, we were then able to document that, between the period of just preceding the announcement of the mission and then the sort of unleashing of system-wide commitment, but from a system that was actually very well prepared to deliver because people had been working on that. It wasn't like the system preparedness came only after the political announcement. What the political announcement did was kind of tell everyone you're being watched, deliver towards this outcome. And in the 2 years, within the first 2 years of that political announcement, we were able to document through our research that 19 million additional children were reached in just 1 year with a set of evidence-based solutions. But a lot of work had been done before that by many different people in the system so that the system was ready to deliver. So, to me, it just speaks to the idea of you don't have to wait for the political announcement or the official policy announcement. There's a lot of preparing of the ground for scaling, for innovating around the scaling, for getting people ready to think about, okay, once we actually get that political, voice, how do you move fast? It just that sort of announcement just accelerates things. So, I think we have to have this kind of mentality of how do we get systems to tipping point? How do we get everyone to tipping point in here? And sometimes that's a longish journey, but you can accelerate impact and reach by sort of bringing everyone together. And it's not any one person, it's, everyone, everywhere, but a real core of people, sort of working that science, policy, action, interface, and preparedness. And to be honest, I think this is happening everywhere. I think this is happening in many different policy contexts. And often what a policy community that cares about an issue is simply waiting for is that political endorsement that pushes the whole system to move the agenda fast towards impact. The climate community has done an amazing job over the last so many years of bringing so many people together to begin to talk about climate. And, my question to that policy community is surely you're not going to allow one government, powerful as it is, to prevent the systems from moving forward now that we've reached tipping point in so many other places, right? So I think it really is for all of us to stay vigilant, work together, keep our eyes on that impact ball, and keep providing the evidence, but to not be naive about what it takes. We got to keep the problem on the agenda, got to keep people together, got to have that basket of solutions at hand. You never know when a prime minister is going to decide that your issue is the issue that they pay attention to. We got to be prepared. Thank you.
Purnima. I think people are waiting for questions. So we can just start with, I saw his hands up for a long time, so maybe I'll come back to you next. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I'm Selim Rafi, Deputy Director for Research and Strategy at CERAD. And I'm glad that Guy has mentioned that science policy interface is also a research area, because what we have seen here, that there are tons of different models of interaction between science and policy. And that's good, because we have a lot of empirical examples of what works and what doesn't work. But on top of that, we need also to have a theoretically informed discussion, rely on a lot of literature that exists on science policy interface, and that has already thought about the institutional design, the functioning, the impact of different models of science policy interface. And with that idea, together with the FAO Chief Scientist Office, CERAD has collaborated to produce a guidance document that really builds on this literature and on all those experts on the ground that has some experience in different countries on science policy interface, but also again with also experts from the field to develop a guidance document on strengthening science policy interface for food system transformation. And that's, to my knowledge, is the first time that we have such a comprehensive document that asks the why we need a more functioning science policy interface ecosystem, the what are the different models, and the how concretely it could work. And without being normative, because we know that there are multiple situations and depending on the topics, but putting some questions on the table to help reflect those who are interested in strengthening and those ecosystem, to reflect on the best way to do that. And so now we are in a process of piloting this guidance document in different countries. We did that in Vietnam already. We will do that in Senegal next month. We'll do that in South America, probably in Colombia. So, and we will do also some kind of study on impact, precisely to help, again, measure success and failure of different models, and also building on the Montpellier process, which is an arena where also we have the possibility to reflect on those different models of science policy interface. Thank you very much. So it was a comment.
This information, I think it will be helpful for many people in the room. So I'd request you to keep your questions or comments short, because we are running short of time. So yeah.
Sorry. My first question, actually, everything I need to like to say goes to you, Jonathan. So you showed us the PEPA micro simulation tool. 3 questions. Does it account for AI bias? Does it need to be constantly updated as the context of the country changes and shifts? Does this extend to tangible structured interventions to assist government and not to impose what you have generated from AI onto them, thinking that is what is best for that specific country? And then to go back to your question where you said, why do we continue to have problems if we have policies that are in place to act as a support mechanism? So a quick answer to that, I would say, is it's unrealistic ambitions. We have global agendas that come up, and some countries are not at the point where they should be or would be supported to have any business in agreeing to those agreements. So then governments develop policies that are unrealistic. Another thing is there's always this need to kind of separate policy and economy and have those two things sit in different silos when those two need to speak to each other. And the reason that I say that you cannot create a policy when you have not assessed how far your economy has grown, because that would tell you which targets are realistic. Can you do this? Do that? Do you have the money to do that? Do you need to reform other places like your taxation systems to do that? You know, and it also goes back to Noura's story about, I think it's TOEFL, the project. The reason why the second results didn't make sense is they forgot to look at the country's purchasing power, if you looked at the purchasing power, you would have noticed that less people need grants, hence the results would have been different from the first time around. And another thing is, I think a lot of the times the reason why policy doesn't work, we fail to look at the past to inform the future and the current. So people just automatically look at the future, but not understanding where you've come from. Thank you.
Jonathan, maybe you can pick one of the three questions so that we could take more questions from the hall.
Yeah, I think I'll just take the first one, which relates to AI bias, and then also accounting for government when there is any form of changes. So yes, it does account for that. We have a very robust structure, and that structure accounts for uses both global level, but also national level data. And that data is updated constantly. So we have a back end and at the front end, and that back end is both manually and automatically updated with resources at the national level. And in terms of changes in government policies, yes, I mean, since it's based on a robust back-end data set, anytime there is a change or a shift in government priorities, then we are also able to update that very fast.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Thanks a lot. Can I ask a wicked question? I was wondering that, across the room, there seems to be an overt optimism and enthusiasm for influencing policies, policy impact. And somehow to me and to many other political scientists, this seems to be at odds with the pulse on the street where, the citizens of various countries seem to be entirely disenchanted with their governments' policies. And we are seeing huge sways of changes, right? And I was wondering, therefore, that how much should we be focusing on, policies and changing policies? And in that context, Purnima, I really like your idea about the policy community. And I think within the CGIAR, perhaps, should we be also looking at a whole bunch of other stakeholders and actors and maybe shifting our focus on these smaller changes, incremental changes that happen across the policy environment, and not so much see success as, or sort of reward success as, the change of a certain policy. One thing that I do want to say is that many policies tend to be have quite disastrous impacts on the ground. The most recent, I think, one is of ending open defecation. And although in principle sounds great, huge numbers of toilets have been, we've done a study, huge numbers of toilets have been built all across South Asia and other countries with very little thought of what happens to the shit. So now, literally, our project is saying that we are sitting on a ticking shit bomb. So there are many policies like that have incredible short-sightedness, right? So, I mean, I think it's not an overtly rosy picture, and I think we need to look at the complexities of what goes into making policies. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So if there are some more, you have a question, Clemens? Okay, so maybe if there's no more questions in the hall, I can give it to you so that you can ask your question and then also give the closing remarks.
Okay, at the same time. Okay, I have a question for Guy. And it's on the holistic approach. So we see a lot of funding constraints nowadays, right? In Europe, in a lot of countries we are working in, debt to GDP ratios are rising, governments are short of cash, just struggling. Development aid is sort of going down. So my maybe a little bit provocative question here is, can we afford this holistic approach any longer? Looking at economic growth, jobs, environment, biodiversity, everything together? Or do we have to prioritize? And if so, who should prioritize?
We have this discussion, and if we have budget constraints, if we have time constraints, usually we prefer to select one range of evidence based on the economy. But if we are not able to take into account climate change, biodiversity loss, soil degradation, okay, we will maybe answer to a question for a few years, but we will not be able to answer the question for the next generation. So we have this discussion, but the question is, again, for you as researcher, which tools do you have to be able to address that? To some extent, economists are responsible of some of the evolution we face. It means that policymakers are not able to think outside the economic dimensions. And to some extent, we are here because we have a too narrow framework to analyze the policies.
Thank you so much. That was a nice question and a very nice reply. So, Clemens, do you want to give the closing remarks and summarize our discussions today?
I can try. Okay. All right. So I think one thing is very clear. The starting point of whatever we do, I think we should ask, what is the problem, right? If there is no problem, then we probably don't need policy, right? So I think we should ask the question, what is the problem? And maybe one step more is, what could be a future problem? We're just not living in the past, but we also have to look into the future. So I think that's really important. And that's partly why we have organized a policy program, like Jonathan has said, in 3 main action areas. Sorry for the self-promotion here. But the first one is really agenda setting. Right? Maybe 20 years ago, people were saying climate change is coming, now it's here. Okay, now what? But now our job as researchers is, how will the world maybe look like in 10, 20 years? What are the future problems? I think it's very important. Then the rapid response, I think we have heard a lot about it, is another sort of more demand-driven approach that we all need to follow. And then the institution building is so important. No, ideally in 5, 10 years, a lot of the local institutions, our partners, can do a lot of the work that we are doing right now. I think that is important. Then policy research doesn't really make sense without engagement. No, and we have heard wonderful examples from everyone here almost on the panel. Trust is important. The quality of research is really important. And then the country engagement, the regional engagement, the partner engagement is critical. Now, the question is, why is the implementation sometimes still weak, right? I think one of the big answers is we don't care enough about the political economy. We give recommendations, maybe focus on that value chain or the other, without holistically looking at sort of what is the political economy around this specific value chain or the issue. So that's why in the policy program, our goal is to, whatever policy recommendation we give or policy area we are working on, be it fertilizer subsidies or water policies or other things, let's have a sort of a political economy check, right? Is it even realistic that the policymaker would even consider this, given the political economy that we have? There was quite a bit of talk about coherence. And I appreciate the concept. I think even here it can be helpful, maybe not to start with sort of seeing coherence as the problem, but first ask, what is the development problem? And then see whether coherence plays a role or not. So maybe flipping things around can be one way to look at this. A lot of discussion about policy diplomacy. And I think that's really important, and I've seen that a lot, no? So when you talk to people from different countries or even different areas of work, if you don't talk about politics, but you talk about data, it's a different conversation, and it can actually help to bring people together, be them from Pakistan and India or from Egypt and Ethiopia. It's possible, and I think this I fully agree with. And then the science policy dialogue, I think, is critical. It's also very country specific, and the political context matters. Now, whether you try to do this in Egypt or Ethiopia can be very different from a more open place like Kenya or other things. So maybe this is my probably failed attempt to summarize a lot of the discussion, but I appreciate also the feedback, and it will be also helpful for us in the policy program and in other programs to do even better. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Clemens. So you did an effective job of summarizing it, I should say. So thanks everyone for participating and engaging with us. And I'd like to say just one last thing. So we are on LinkedIn, right? So we have our ears open to you from wherever you are. Just send in your questions, send in your challenges that you faced. Tell us the topics you would like to work with us. CGIAR Policy Innovations. You can find our handle in the LinkedIn page and follow us or keep messaging us. So thanks so much, everyone. A big round of applause to everyone.